This is Jackanory Jr. Hello, I'm Sheridan. This is the story of a very happy dog called Harold, a very annoying cat called Pud, and the duck who came to stay. It's called Harold and the Duck. Over the hills, but not so very far away, was Harold's farm. There were yellow moons in the nights, and woolly meats, that's sheep to you and me, in the meadows, a cobbled courtyard, and an old weather vane telling the wind which way to blow. I love everything about my farm, Harold used to say to himself. Why, even the wind does as it's told. There was only one problem in Harold's life, and that was a stray cat. This cat went by the name of Pud. Pud was never allowed into the kitchen until Harold had gone to bed. The Pud didn't like it, but sort of accepted it. It was part of the rules. And so, on this particular night, all was apparently well. Pud had been fed, and Harold was asleep in his basket. In the courtyard, silent but for the owls, starlight made silhouettes of the barns. And it was here, in the darkness of one of the corn bins, that something of consequence happened. An egg was laid. It was a pale egg. There's nothing very special about it, except that by dawn it had been abandoned by its mother, and by breakfast time, discovered by Harold. "What has he got?" demanded Willow, who was a muddy little bloke with a pop gun and big blue eyes. "Obvious, ain't it?" said his sister Lily. "Its mother's gone, and I'm going to hatch it." Within a very short while, she had created a nest out of a colander and a bobble hat. Covering the egg with straw, she transferred her invention to the basement of an old stove, where the dishes usually warm. "It's too hot in there, you'll cook it," said Willow. "Well, we'll just wait and see, won't we?" said Lily. And they did wait. And after a few days, what they saw, or rather heard, was a tapping inside the egg. And then suddenly there was a loud crack, followed by a foot, and a small yellow face came out, with eyes like a couple of match heads. Expecting some sort of chicken, Harold blinked. The thing wasn't the colour of a chicken, fluffy like a chicken, but it wasn't a chicken. It was a duck. "Isn't he sweet?" said Lily. "I'm going to call him Duck." Harold stood there, wagging it till it nearly flew off, but barely got a pat. He was a little miffed at all the attention this duck was getting. Cuddles were suddenly few and far between, going down and down as the duck grew and grew. It seemed to grow overnight, like a mushroom. In Harold's view, it was a horrible-looking bird, with a tuft of feathers on the top of its head like a part of a toothbrush. And worse, it slept in the kitchen with a lamp blazing over it to keep it warm. Nobody considered the side effects of this, which was to keep Harold awake. No matter how he turned, he couldn't nod, not even by smelling his special unwashed sock he'd had since he was a pup. Ooh. There was but one consolation. Within a week, this duck would be living outside with the rest of them, and would be gone. 2 weeks later, the duck was twice the size and had taken over the entire kitchen, swaggering and quacking like it owned the place. There was no reasoning with it. It was self-centred, rude and arrogant. It got corn for breakfast and flicked it all over the room. Not content with its own bowl, it got it speaking to Harold's and threw his meat in the air. It was all too much and couldn't go on. Somehow, this duck had to go. Next morning, Harold finished his first session of barking in the yard, and as you can imagine, there were a lot of things that wanted barking at. Most of it was passing tractors and chicken work, and sometimes too, of course, the Pud. Now, Pud had been taking an interest in Harold's relationship with this duck, and he was watching by the back door as the wiry one, that's Harold, reappeared to find the duck standing in his bowl of water like it was a pond. "What are you doing in my bowl?" "Quack. You arrogant duck." Until now, Harold was unaware of the Pud. "And there's that vet's bag of a cat," he woofed, "full of mice and smirking. He went after Pud like a bullet. Out in the yard, kicking dust into the barn. Up the stairs they went. And down the other ones. Round and round the corn bins with Harold too puffed for threats. Pud was a tail away, rushing into the darkness, when Harold suddenly realised he'd been detained. His legs were still going, but he wasn't going anywhere. He was stuffed into an abandoned pipe like a cork. Only his head stuck out, staring at Pud, who was nonchalantly preening itself on the other side. "Not like you to fall for an old trick like that, Harold." "Woof!" said Harold. "You know what you are," said the Pud, with the kind of creamy smile for which they are famous. "You are as dopey as the duck." "Woof!" said Harold in exasperation. "Oh, woof to you," said Pud, mimicking him. "Woof, woof, woof. But it doesn't get you anywhere, does it? Do you think I'd let a duck get the better of me? I'd have that overgrown Christmas dinner out in a second." "How?" said Harold, still bicycling with his back feet. "My advice, Harold, is when you're stuck, be it with a hole or a duck, you'd better stop pushing and use your brains." And with that, the Pud slunk away into a galaxy of buttercups. Harold woofed after him, but gave up. And then gradually what the Pud said made sense. What if he stopped pushing and bicycled his feet in the opposite direction? Suddenly, he was out. He landed on the barn floor with a bump. He tried to think of something with his brain, but it all felt sort of dopey. The only thing he could think about was how much he disliked the duck. Back at the house, the kitchen was as messy as it had ever been, but Harold ignored it and tried to have it out one-to-one with the duck. He basically told him what's what and who's who. The duck pecked him and got a hold of his sock. Now, as we know, this sock was of some importance to Harold and he wanted it back. Duck wanted to keep it, and a row broke out and they both tugged at either end of the sock with fur and feathers stuck up until Lily skipped in from the garden. "Oh, don't be so mean, Harold," she said. "You're much older than him, let him have it." The sock became the possession of the delighted duck, and Harold was ordered out of the house. "Bad dog," scolded Lily. "Bad, bad dog." Harold sat alone on the hill until the moon rose as yellow as buttercups. He was hoping the children would come to call him, but they hadn't. It was approaching supper time and he felt hungry. But more than that, he felt unwanted and sad. The unwantedness seemed to collect in his tail, which he couldn't lift no matter how hard he tried. His tail was as heavy as his heart. At last, hunger had the better of him, and with lifeless ears and a leaden wagger, he made his way back to the house. The door was ajar, and he crept into the kitchen behind so many sudden blinks, he could hardly believe what he was looking at. There was a bowl of fresh food, fresh water, and no duck. A rapid sniff round confirmed it. The duck had gone! Harold leapt in the air and came down in his basket. Oh, joy! Oh, bliss! What a present is home! There, in all its magnificence, was a full meat serving, and he tucked in, savouring the texture of crunchy biscuits and rubbery morsels. As he ate, he became aware of laughter. It sounded like something funny was happening upstairs.